Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and welcome to the Post 51. How do we hold ourselves accountable? Now, we're reaching the end of our coaching series. Woo, woo, woo. But can I say, when I was sketching out the 10 parts of this coaching series, I thought this accountability post would be a bit small and sort of a gentle ending, a gentle denouement, where we start to talk about evaluation. But like for many of you, the last 2.5 months or so, we've seen some pretty bad stuff. We've seen some pretty bonkers stuff. We've seen people behaving incredibly badly, initiating fear and worry and anger and confusion in other human beings. And many of these failures have been failures of leadership through a lack of authenticity and sometimes, of course, just lying. So I've seen people, humans, a lot of you, damaged by the behaviour of others. And much of that behaviour has been, to use a word, careless. So this minor episode in our coaching series has all of a sudden, through the series, become an incredibly important moment. And I feel, to be frank, pretty transformed by the research and the work I did in preparation for this week. So this is a moment for all of us to look in the mirror, work out who we are, what we are accountable and responsible for, and most importantly, to stand up and stand for something and state, you know what, that type of behaviour will not exist on my watch. My standards for accountability are high. So this isn't about leadership in terms of title or money or positional power. Absolutely not. This is about leadership in our daily lives as we walk through life with decency and kindness and compassion and activating listening cultures. This is also activating compassion about the injustices and the inequalities that are currently buffeting other human beings. So leadership is not a title. It never has been a title. It's a behaviour. It's a practice. And that behaviour and that practice begins and ends when we hold ourselves accountable. So today I'm going to offer 10 mantras for your consideration to think about your relationship with accountability. And as always, I've got 10 suggestions for you. 9 of them may be rubbish for you, but there may be one moment today, a phrase or an idea that encourages you to pause and reflect and think about your own life. There may be just one moment where you start to think about your relationship with yourself and your relationship with others in a different way. So how do we hold ourselves accountable? Question mark. Here we go. 1 of 10. Let's do the first one. The Rock was right. Know your role. I'm an enormous fan of professional wrestling. Yes, I've written about it, and I am an enormous fan of the legendary Undertaker. In fact, I'm one of the female fans of The Undertaker. We refer to ourselves as the Lady Takers, obviously. But I've also had enormous respect for The Rock and, of course, Dwayne Johnson. Incredible life, incredibly inspirational man, I think. But I always remember his theme tune, the music they'd come out to when they're about to commence a battle, and also one of his great slogans, which was "Know your role." Yeah. So I love that, know your role. So that means we have to really understand our current position. Who are we? What's our positional power? Are we a PhD student? Are we a PhD supervisor? Are we an academic? Have we got some type of managerial algorithm? Are we running an SME? Do we have caring responsibilities with children or with elderly relatives? Powerful, powerful roles. So we have to understand our role and therefore then the relationships that go along with it. We have to know our role and put boundaries around that role and the actions, the behaviors and the consequences of that role have to be explored. And we have to create boundaries. We've talked a lot about boundaries in this series, haven't we? Yeah. But boundaries matter in a different way this week, because once we understand the boundary around our role, we can then configure our responsibilities within it. But this accountability begins with a crucial stage: understanding our role and the responsibilities that are the matrix within it. So this is so important, because if people are lacking decency or compassion or care or respect for themselves or other people, they will blame everybody else except themselves. That's when we get into the blame and shame culture of other human beings. So I want you, all of us, to invest in our role and understand the responsibilities that emerge from it. And that means we know where our boundaries are drawn. Now, inside those boundaries, you are 100% accountable. Outside of those boundaries, not your circus. 2, be honest. Who knew this is a thing? You have to remind people to be honest, because accountability is based on honesty. And often this honesty is stopped or blocked when a blame culture is in place in an organisation or institution. So don't let blame or shame move you or divert you from your pathway through to accountability. If we make a mistake, own it, claim it, speak the words. If we don't know how to do something, I don't know how to do that, speak the words, own it, claim it. So this means all of us have to have a good look at ourselves and a good look at our behaviour and understand our strengths and our weaknesses, and be cool and be honest with those strengths and those weaknesses, because lying costs us time. And time is so incredibly precious. So tell the truth, admit the error, acknowledge that you don't know how to do something, and be accountable. And you know what? When you're accountable in that way, suddenly and magically, your life simplifies and the relationships with people around you deepen, because they can trust you. 3, listen, apologize, and take action in response to your behavior. Okay. Apologies matter so much. Through my career, and particularly in the leadership roles I've held in the last couple of decades, bad things have occurred. Wow. I've seen bad stuff on research misconduct, research integrity breaches, sexual assault, sexual harassment, shouters, just name something, and most of us have seen it in the last 20 years. And even though I was not responsible for a lot of those actions and behaviours, I understood, and I understand to this day, the power and the energy that emerges when any of us apologise. It is so important to listen to the hurt of others. I know it's incredibly uncomfortable when we listen to the pain and the discomfort of other human beings. I understand that, but that is our responsibility as humans. So we open the space for another human being to tell us our narrative, our stories of hurt. Now, I know it's difficult to hear, but when people share their very deepest pain with you, it's important to respect that person and respect everything that they've gone through. And you know what? Apologise that they have gone through that experience. If, of course, we are leaders in an organisation, we are accountable. We are absolutely responsible for the behaviour that emerges on our watch. So, we must, in a leadership position, apologise. But you see, that's only the first step. People sort of go, oh, look, I'm really sorry. And that's almost the end of it. Well, it's not. The apology is the start of a new iteration of behaviours. And what we then do after the apology is we explain in concrete steps to that other human being what is going to happen now, so that what has happened to them will never happen to another human being. We may not be able to ever counter or manage or address the loss from bullying, sexual assault, sexual harassment, but we can be held accountable and show how that behaviour will be addressed and how it will not repeat. And that's important. So our accountability emerges when we express our sorrow at what another person has experienced. We grant them the space to tell that story of that pain without judgment, and we apologise what has happened to them, and then create concrete steps from today to demonstrate how change will be actioned. Yeah. So accountability emerges when we iteratively return to that person and say, how are you going? And let me tell you how we are addressing the issues that you expressed. We are filled with sorrow, but this is how we are actioning change and returning to that person all the time. So when we listen, when we apologise, and when we take action, we are accountable not only to ourselves, but we are accountable to improving the lives of the people around us. 4, don't overcommit and don't overpromise. I'm still learning this one. Now, I know this is hard to do because our whole culture is activated by saying yes, being positive, being insta-ready. Are you going to do this? Yes, yes. Our whole culture is based on saying yes to that dress. But we need to understand ourselves better, and we need to understand our time better. And we need to understand the kindness of a no, and particularly the kindness of an early no. Similarly, our culture is sort of organised around people who overpromise and overstretch themselves, because all of us are sort of looking for a hero to make our burdens lighter. So it's in our culture to go, oh, look, I can make it easier for you. Well, you might be able to, but if you overpromise, you're going to make the situation worse. So think about our university and business culture at the moment. Think about the metrics. Think about stretch targets. Think about visions. Think about strategic plans. And often these documents are vehicles for over-promising rather than reading the present with clarity and presence and engagement and evidence, and instead offering a responsible and evidentially driven pathway into and through metrics. So this culture is really damaging to us as human beings. It's also damaging to organisations. So I always argue, say an early and kind no, and then explain why you've said a no. That's important too, because that means all of us stop selling ourselves and overselling ourselves like sort of fruitcake at a fair. We understand who we are, we understand our intrinsic value, and we understand how our intrinsic value is enhanced when we are honest. 5, ask what I could have done differently. Oh yeah. It's been really interesting since I started doing the research for this coaching series, and I've now read hundreds, maybe even 1,000 different research objects in preparation for each of these sessions. But the surprise for me has been the domination in the literature of a fear of regret, the great supposed problem of regret. And as you may remember in our post that we explored, I think about 3 weeks ago, about what you can control and what you can't control, one of the things you can't control is the past. So regret is pretty useless because it's happened in the past. Nothing you think about or feel will actually change the past. And so therefore, regret is wasteful of our present. But that doesn't mean that we don't reflect on the past with the goal of asking what we could have done differently so that we can improve our present. So reflection is crucial to accountability. It allows us to see ourselves from the perspective of other people, and that's often pretty frightening. But it also allows us, and this has been so important to me this year, it allows us to really think about the choices that we have made in our lives, and if we would make different choices with a different data set. Very interesting. So the point is, living is a practice. It's not perfection. We come to life every day as a practice, not as a perfection narrative. So reflect on the past, not with regret, but to gather information and fresh insights to improve your present. 6, this changed my life. 6, this is the one. This changed my life. It changes my life every day. Here we go. 6, be prepared to explain with evidence how you have reached a decision. This is an important one, and if anybody wants to claim the word leader and leadership, this is absolutely crucial. And the failures of leadership I've seen in the last couple of months have come from leaders not actually activating number 6. Because accountability asks that we justify our decisions. And we justify our decisions beyond sort of titles or money or positional power. So, stuff like, I've made this decision because I'm the Vice-Chancellor. And that's not a justification. That's positional power. That's okay, you've got positional power, but that's not demonstrating the rationale behind which you made that decision. So this is not a matter of being defensive. This is the great lesson I've learned through life. Actually, it's about being able and willing to walk someone through your decision making. So I have made this decision, and let me explain with you my working out how I actually got to this decision and the evidence that has scaffolded this decision. And this is incredibly empowering, whether it's a personal decision or a professional decision. Now, I know you may feel vulnerable because people are checking your work, but ironically, it's actually incredibly empowering, because you are allowing other people to see your thinking, you're opening out arguments, and if you have made a mistake, you're actually then being accountable because someone says, oh, look, I'm not sure stage 3 in making that decision was actually right. Have you thought about this alternative data set? And you're going, wow, a brilliant person has offered commentary that is enhancing my work. Isn't that fantastic? And of course, if we have made a mistake, this mode of accountability grants us great insight and we improve our arguments. So if we can get beyond the defensiveness, the brittleness, if you will, and we can get to the point where we not only share a decision with colleagues and friends and family around us, but our working out, our rationale for that decision, then it can change so much because it changes relationships. Yes, it changes the relationship between leaders and followers, but it changes relationship between friends and colleagues. And at the moment, and the word I'm using a lot actually is brittle. We're seeing a lot of brittle leadership and a lot of very brittle decision making that is making decisions without any understanding, any care, and that's bad enough, but also no evidence to verify the decision that they are making. So how about we make a decision today to live differently? That we're not only accountable for our decisions, but we are accountable for the strategies and processes that got us there. Yeah. 7. Ooh, yeah. We are not born with accountability. It is a way of living and a way of learning. Accountability is based on clarity. And that clarity creates very strong and authentic relationships. But you see, accountability must be spoken. It's not organic. It doesn't emerge naturally. It is artificial, it is constructed, and it must be spoken. So hoping that the people around you will be accountable for their work and their action is ridiculous, because we know that the instinct of what happens to all of us is when something goes wrong, we'll blame somebody or we'll shame somebody so that we're not accountable because we don't want to feel the pain of being wrong or being vulnerable or being hurt. I get that. But for accountability to emerge, we have to live this. We have to live it, and we have to continue to learn within it and speak the words. So accountability won't happen if we wish for it, if we hope for the best. But it will emerge when we construct the narratives, we share the vulnerability, and that sharing of vulnerability, speaking the words, is what builds trust. So in other words, this is crucial. Again, I realised this through the research this week. Accountability is never intrinsic to a workplace, to a group of friends, or to a family, or indeed a PhD program, can I say. Accountability requires that we all intervene in our current relationships. 8. Oh yeah, being accountable includes being accountable for our emotions. There is incredible strength, not weakness, there is incredible strength in admitting our mistakes, being honest, and ensuring transparency in our decision making. But number 8 is the tough one probably, and that is asking that we are accountable for the emotions that we express. Now, this was a fascinating bit of the research I conducted this week, and Celine DaCosta was particularly intriguing, and I'll present a reference to her work. But we have control over our emotions, and our emotions come from within ourselves, and no one can force us to feel an emotion. Wow. Now, someone may shout at us. We've all worked for shouters. You know, someone may shout at us, but we make a decision about how we respond to that shouting and to that shouter. If someone says something bonkers on Twitter, and then there's sort of this Twitter pile-on thing, actually, that's not the way things should be. Because if someone says something bonkers on Twitter, then no one is forcing us to read it, and no one is forcing us to make a commentary on it. If we are outraged, then that is a choice that we have made. So in these tough times, I offer an argument for your consideration today. And that is, we are responsible for the emotions that we activate. We are accountable for the emotions that we share. Now, we live in accelerated times, to quote the late, great Paul Virilio, but how do we sort of slow down the cycles of our emotional lives? Emotions like outrage, blame, shame, fear emerge when we have to rationalize something in our lives. How about, instead of rationalizing stuff in our lives or displacing stuff onto other people, we are accountable for our actions. And we are also accountable for our emotions and if, when, and how we express them. And life suddenly becomes a lot more complex than a sort of Star Wars narrative of heroes and heroines and villains and victims. How about we reduce the drama and we increase the accountability, particularly accountability for the emotions that we express? 9. Accountability is the enemy of mediocrity. In my childhood, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, there were all these cliches that sort of circulated in Australia at that time, like, you know, near enough's good enough, near enough's good enough, she'll be right, she'll be right, mate, she'll be right, she'll be right. And look, that might be okay, that situation might be all right, might be okay, but is okay the standard that you want to set for yourself? Mediocrity has fuel, and it's fueled by fear and worry and blame and shame. To transcend mediocrity, we have to be accountable to ourselves and accountable to others. And we continue to think, oh, look, it'll be okay. It's okay. It's okay. And of course, we'll think it's okay if our work is never checked by other people, right? But accountability, particularly in academic life, peer review, referee reports, feedback, feed forward, and these great moments of practice, accountability practice in our lives, enable us to transcend beyond the satisfactory or the comfortable or the okay. And finally, 10, practice the stages of accountability. Oh, this is terrific. So the research confirms that there are basically 6 stages to accountability. Set an expectation. Activate a commitment to achieving that expectation. Brilliant. Measure your progress. Measuring matters here a lot. 4, provide and gather feedback on your progress. 5, link your progress to consequences. And 6, evaluate your effectiveness. Those stages have sort of changed everything to me. And what I do now, I've actually got it. I'm looking at my office desk now, and I've got them on my office desk now. So whenever I'm starting a new project, I'm about to start 3 in the next week. So whenever I start a new project, I go through those stages, right? And I also realise I'm 54. I also realise what I've done wrong all this time, because I've been very good at setting goals, and I've sort of achieved them. It's been okay, but the mistake I've made is I've set a goal and then I haven't set an expectation to achieve it. And the great thing about having that expectation to achieve it is it starts to build up commitment and then momentum. So when we have an expectation about that goal, that enables us to complete it with greater ease. Wow. So then we're on our way. So with verifications and with the measurements of our achievement put along the way, so we measure what we're doing, we can start to change our lives today. And there's a couple of phrases I carry with me when I think about and remember the importance of accountability. And both of them come from Earl Nightingale. Interesting guy, people sort of see him as the self-help guy, and I get that. And he was a great writer, and he did create the self-help movement, but he was also a publisher. And he created transformative trajectories in publishing as well. So I've got a lot of respect of this guy. And he had 2 great phrases that I do carry with me. And the first is, famously, we become what we think about. We become what we think about. And his second phrase that I hadn't heard before I was doing the research for the post this week is, if you are unwilling to risk the unusual and the uncomfortable, then you will have to settle for the ordinary and the comfortable. End of quote. So if we drill into accountability, we stop waiting for that perfect moment, that perfect opportunity, that winning lotto, because it'll never come. And then when it never comes, we start to blame and shame others. And so accountability stops that cycle emerging. Instead, we become what we think about. And we become accountable, responsible, humble, kind, and a lot calmer. Perhaps that is the best way we can transform and transcend what's going on at the moment, and the best way we can critique the pretenders, the bullies, the harassers, and the liars. We can create a standard, a high standard, and you know what? We can hold ourselves accountable. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.